My Camera and I, An Incredible Journey by Holly Gordon. And now I'd like to present the very talented Holly Gordon.
You know, first of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be sharing this journey with you. And way back in 1966, when my husband and I bought a little house on Manor Lane because we wanted to raise our children in a community that was already socially and culturally diverse. And we did. We raised 3 boys, and they are doing very well. And they said, living in Bayshore and going through the Bayshore schools and all of the library programs, they can work with people all over. So if I thought back in 1966 that now I would be sharing what happened throughout these decades, I never would have believed it. So if you turn out the lights, we'll let the journey begin. Okay, a friend took this of me in Arles. I was visiting where Vincent van Gogh stayed for a while. Vincent van Gogh is one of my most dear artists. Who knew that in 1967, Helen Torr, who was the love interest and later on the wife of Arthur Dove, would move to Bayshore after Arthur Dove died, and that we would move to Bayshore and intersect with her time here for 1 year. And I didn't know anything at all about Helen Torr, known as Reds, living and dying in Bayshore until many decades later when I was working with Ward Hooper and we tripped over the fact that our relationship was intersecting with Arthur Dove's and Helen Torr. So it's just absolutely crazy how certain things happen. It's almost like there are these invisible threads, and that's an Asian attitude, philosophy, that we have these connections to people in the world, and ultimately we will connect with them no matter how long and circuitous the thread is. So here are our 3 boys when they were little. And my husband was scoutmaster of Troop 43 that met at St. Peter's Church, and 2 of our sons became Eagle Scouts. The middle one decided he wanted to be in jazz band in high school, and that was that. People often ask me, I'm coming to Long Island. Where should I shoot? What are beautiful places to see? And I would say, you don't have to come to Long Island. All you have to do is open your eyes. Beauty is all around us. And we shouldn't discount what's close to us. These tulips were taken in a garden in Bayshore, and when I was doing a tulip presentation here many years ago, I thought, yeah, I have photographed tulips from gardens all over the world, but I want to do some Bayshore tulips. So there they are. Here's a magnolia that I took with film back in the 1990s in Bayard Cutting Arboretum, which is a very favorite place for me to photograph and find inspiration. Gardner's Park. Gardner's Park in winter.
Wow.
Connecticut River State Park in autumn. Call this deer kiss. Really the doe and the deer, it's like they're sniffing to get each other's scent. and the backlighting was just perfect. And,
Get that
and I can read that. I did this with film, and you know, I'm crunching along because I love to crunch the leaves in the fall. And the photographer I was with said, "You'd never make it as a hunter because you." That's true. Well, okay, Muttontown Preserve, and this was, I took this in 1993 in the autumn, and it took Best Color for a juried exhibition over in the Long Island Museum in Stony Brook. And I'm walking through the Great Smokies, and my phone rings, and it's Karen Lipson from the New York Times. And she said, "I want to interview you." I said, "Sure." And she said, "I bet you did that with digital." I said, "Oh no, I shot that with Velvia." Okay, so the ISO is 50, I shot it at 40, I underexposed it because I wanted the color to be more saturated. And contrary to what some people think about the beautiful light early in the morning or late in the day, light is wonderful all day long. Even cloudy days are wonderful all day long, depending upon how you know what to do with your camera device. And I knew that the contrast would be great, so I'd get kind of like the dotty pointillistic effect from that image. That was film. Okay, so in case you don't know me that well, orange was our color. And we are taking this wonderful photography workshop in Pennsylvania, and we're on this farm, and we discover an orange tractor. I mean, it was like destiny.
Oh my God.
So, my husband passed away on Good Friday in 1996. And we had shared a love and pleasure of taking pictures, of doing photography together. And I thought back then that I lost him, but I still loved photography, and I threw myself into it. So I started traveling all over the place, and when I was explaining it to one of my sons, he said, "Oh, just like the first page in Herman Melville's book, Moby Dick. When I'm walking down the street and I want to knock the hat off of everyone I meet, I know it's time to go to sea." And that's kind of the way I started to live my life after I lost my husband, because I needed to focus on things to keep me positive and afloat. So I went to the Galapagos on many occasions, and my work was in the 2002 annual report. And there is a little bit of that was of the Galapagos. And way back when 1999 became 2000, and people were petrified of what's going to happen with Y2K. There always are going to be technological glitches, like I have to use my finger instead of the remote, but we deal with it. And people said to me, "Well, Holly, what happens if the computers go bonkers when you're down in Antarctica?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'll just spend a few more days in Antarctica." But on the way back, I climbed Cape Horn, and that was just very, very exhilarating. And photographing the gray whales in Baja, and there you can see I'm petting the gray whale.
Wow.
And there I am sitting in Antarctica. It was during the Antarctic summer, so it was not as cold as it is in the winter. And it was very bright. And of course, on the way to Antarctica, we stopped in Santiago, Chile, and that's the stopping point for going off to Easter Island. So I just kind of figured, how often am I going to be in Santiago? Might as well take a side trip to Easter Island. And this is Mother Nature's navel. It's a little place to visit in Easter Island, and the rocks have a lot of iron, very warm. But it just was nice to be there. And one of the neat things about being in Easter Island at that time was I had the island practically to myself with my God. And I went to China, and the air was so thick there that it was like, I don't know if you do photography, anybody does photography, but there are these neutral density filters to gray things down. I didn't need any filter. The air was just so thick, and that was a color image that comes out is black and white. And when I went down to PhotoFest in Houston to meet with some Chinese gallerists and so forth, they said to me, "You make smog look beautiful." And I thought, oh my God, I'm an environmentalist. What am I doing? And that is true. And Cambodia, and Vietnam, and Nova Scotia. Now see, this is fog, and it was shot with film. And what's so interesting, my friend and I scouted out, we scoped out where we wanted to do our sunset. And we're having dinner, and we see that the fog is rolling in. So we just left money on the table and flew to the spot. And within about a 15-minute period, I was able to get a series of images, and that's Bombay Harbor. And that's another one. And I went to Giverny because Monet and the Impressionists are very important to me artistically, as well as personally. I developed these weird relationships with these artists who are no longer alive, but they mean a lot to me personally, not just aesthetically or creatively, but I have a sensitive feeling for them as human beings. So the wisteria disappointed me a little bit because I wanted it to be brighter, purple. So I did it, he made it. Because I can do a lot of things with technology. And it isn't just pushing, now there's nothing wrong with using an app or whatever, but I'm a control freak, and I want to make technology do what I want it to do. I also want to humanize it. I want people to come to think of technology as being a tool, much the way a pencil or a paintbrush or a chisel is. It's artists can control all kinds of technology, not have the technology control us. Priscilla Hancock said, "Oh, Holly, I've seen your Giverny program so many times, but show it again." So I'm putting in a few Giverny images. And on this particular day, this is the first time I'm in this garden, and I'm so thrilled to be there. And it's rainy, and it's windy, and the tulips have just been blown to smithereens. And I think, oh, what am I going to do? And I go, aha, I am going to do long exposures. And I'm going to capture the movement. And so I scoped out for the colors that I wanted, because that's what I do. I look for color, or I look for shapes or patterns. That's how I look through my viewfinder. And I settled upon this, and then I took a series of slides, and when I got back home, I sandwiched them in Photoshop, layer upon layer upon layer, and that's what I created. Okay, so in 2014, a freelance writer, happened to say to me in a conversation, "Do you know Ward Hooper?" And I know a lot of people, but I didn't know him. And she said, "I think," because he's an artist and he lives in Northport, and he's currently 93 years old, but he wasn't when I met him. He was 7 years younger. And she said, "I see similarities in how you create and in how he paints." So I thanked her very much, and I checked him out on the internet, and I found this painting that he just posted. Are you beginning to feel an invisible thread tugging? So I saw this painting, and it made me think of this image that I created back in 2008 when I was coming back from Photo Fest, where I had gone with my China stuff. And somebody was driving the car when I photographed this through the windshield. And I liked the composition, but there were things that I didn't like about it. So I was messing around in Photoshop, and I really liked what I made, but it wasn't like anything I ever did before. So I tucked it away until I saw this. So I posted my picture on his Facebook page, and I said, "Ward, Elise Perlman mentioned you to me, and I checked you out, and after seeing your painting of Long Island City, it made me think of my night lights that I had created so many years earlier." And so he responded. He said, "Yeah, I see there's something compositionally and with some of the color." And that was it. But the next day, he posted this painting of 3 tulips. He had been a teacher at the Art League of Long Island, and it was springtime, and his class said, "Well, let's do flowers." And he just decided that he would post his tulips. Well, tulips, magic word. So I responded. I have lots of tulips. I was getting ready to have an exhibit at Photo Gallery in Huntington that was called Tulips. So I had zillions of tulip images that were all ready to be displayed. Now, this was taken in Giverny, and it's called Beneath the Bloom. Some people look at it and they think of wine glasses, and other people look at it, they think of tulips, but other people think of it as butt cheeks. Okay, and then another. See? Well, I have lots of tulips. So, after posting that, Ward says to me, "I think we should meet." And so I went up to his house. We are so young then. So I thought, I don't know this man at all. I know he's rather ancient. I am going, honest to goodness, I am going to be so subdued and demure. I don't want to overwhelm him. And he takes me throughout his house, which is humongous. It's this restored barn, 3 levels. It's just amazing. On every flat surface, stacked with paintings. So as he's showing me these paintings, I'm saying, I have something like that. I have something like that. I have something like that. So here is, and then the following week when I went back, I brought some of my prints to show him that I had some things that were similar to his, only we never knew each other, but this was taken in Nova Scotia, just like my Foggy Harbor was taken in Nova Scotia. So we did travel to some of the same locations. So this is one of his images. Hold on to your seats. That's mine. And here's one of his images. And here's mine. And here's another one of his paintings. And there's mine. So, he said, why don't I take you to places on Long Island that inspired me, I'm Ward right now, that inspired me many years ago. And let's see what you do with them. Now you have to understand that Ward back then was 86 or 87. He had had MS for 40-some years. He walked, it was difficult, and he also lost his wife 2.5 years earlier, and he had cared for her. So he wasn't painting, he wasn't going out. I didn't know at the time that he was in a very sad state, and one of his daughters, who lives upstate near Ithaca, wanted him to move and to come live with him. And he was telling me this a few months later. His whole life had been on Long Island and in Northport, and he lost his wife, but he had so much richness that it would have just been a sad thing for him to leave. But I blew into his life, and it was like all of a sudden, he was so excited because he was revisiting. I would drive, he would make out these itineraries of where we would go, and he would say, okay, Holly, make a left, make a right, go down this road, whatever. And I was taking him to all of these places that he loved and painted from years earlier. So I was filling him with renewed love of life, and he was grounding me and centering me that I don't have to travel all over the world. There is so much here, and my creativity just exploded. So he took me to this Victorian house in Northport. This was the first stop that on this first day that we were going to do this kind of a jaunt. And this was the painting that he had made many years earlier. This was the house. And as he was showing me the house, he said, well, Holly, I didn't like the sign, and I didn't like the color, so I changed it. I wanted to get rid of that. I wanted to add something. And so as he's telling me when he sketches out his drawings for his paintings, that he's inspired by what he sees, but he makes all of these changes, I just cracked up. I said, boy, that is exactly what I do. Only I do it with my camera and with technology. So there was the photo. on the left, and on the right is what I created. Okay, so he took me to Eaton's Neck, and this is what I created. And then he took me to Kings Park Bluffs, and I was astounded that flat Long Island actually has bluffs. And that's what I created. So we are working every week. We go out, and I can't wait to go home and dump my stuff into my computer and see what might come of what I photographed. And so he keeps saying to me, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this? And I say, I don't know what we're going to do with this, Ward, but you know, we're having such a wonderful time. We'll just keep doing it and see where it takes us. So one day he says, why don't we propose to the Art League, where he had taught, to have an exhibit. So we did, and they liked the idea very much, and they had a blank spot in August of 2015. And as we're putting together all of our work for this exhibit, he says, you know, we've got a lot of warm colors in our artwork. We need some cool colors. So he shows me this painting. He says, you have anything like this, Holly? And I go back to a photograph that I took out in Montauk before I knew Ward. A naturalist friend of mine takes me out periodically to show me some new sights. And I had this photograph. It was taken in March. And that's what I created. So we had our paired work with cool colors. Okay, he did a lot of paintings from Cold Spring Harbor Pond. And he took me. Now, during this time, I am sharing all of the excitement that is coming from Ward's and my being together. And this friend said, Holly, what the two of you are doing is sensational. Why don't you see if it ties in with artists who have lived and worked here on Long Island? Well, as soon as he said that to me, I thought, oh, it was a V8 moment. Arthur Dove and Helen Torr. Of course. And so I say to Ward, do you know Arthur Dove and Helen Torr? He said, no, but I could take you to their cottage. So this is what I created from Cold Spring Harbor Pond, and when I first did it, I called it Cold Spring Harbor Pond in autumn. But after I did research on Dove and Torr, and he had done the pond, and he called it Indian Summer, I decided to rename mine Indian Summer in homage to Arthur Dove. So there is the cottage. Now, you may not be aware of the cottage, but you might be aware of the eagle's nest that's been in the news because somebody in that area wanted to build a wall, and that would have upset the feng shui of the eagles in their nest, which is across the street from the cottage. Now, the cottage is also under the ownership, guardianship of the Heckscher Art Museum, and that's how I know of Arthur Dove and Helen Torr, because of my connection to the Heckscher. Now here they are in Geneva, New York, way back. what I created from the Dove Torr cottage that is on the Heckscher Museum website. Ward took me to Country Hall, and he wanted me to go way down to the water and photograph the back, but I really liked the facade. And when he saw it, he saw what I created, he decided that he was going to paint again. So it's like for all of these months, he is excited to take me to all of these places. And I am creating like crazy. And he's not creating anything. He's just reliving his past. But all of a sudden, he decided that he was going to start painting again. And it was like our relationship finally came full circle because he was now creating in the present. So he created his painting of Country Hall, and he took me to Ashroken, to the sluice, and normally I don't put people in my pictures and my artwork. They interfere with. I don't, it's hard. In this image that I created, in between the boy in the blue shirt and the boy wearing no shirt, there was another kid. And I got rid of him because, well, because they're not boys to me, they're shapes. And for my image, I wanted that flow of positive and negative space. So for artistic purposes, I got rid of it. And Ward loved my image so much, he decided that he was going to do another painting. Okay, but this was the thing. He did one painting and he wasn't too happy with it. And he did another painting and he really wasn't that happy with it. But because I can get things messed up a little bit, I'm sending all of these high-res images, image files, to the Art League to promote our exhibit. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call from Steve Parks, who used to write for Newsday. He wanted our Boys of Summer in the article that he was writing. So I called up Ward. I said, hey, Ward, you know the second painting you did, the Boys of Summer? Get it matted and framed. It's going to be in the exhibit. Steve Parks wants it. Mat it and frame it. So he did. Okay, so there is my Dove Torr cottage, and there is Ward's. So that is, Ward did 3 new paintings for that exhibit. That one. Okay, so he did the Country Hall, the Boys of Summer, and the Dove Torr cottage. Those were his 3 new paintings, and we have 50, 60 paintings in the exhibit. He did the layout because he had been a graphic designer in a former life. And we did the brush lens project, and he did his painting of Crab Meadow and my creation of Crab Meadow. So when we had this exhibit, we were the project. And projects tend to be finite. We didn't know that when people saw the exhibit that they would be so enthused with what they saw and when they heard our story that people started saying to us, you ought to do a book, you ought to do a book, this is too great. So the way we had the exhibit hung, we had our paired work, and above the paired work, into a film strip, I put photographs of the actual locations so that when people came to the exhibit, they would not only see our creations, but they would see what inspired us to do the creations. So this was Ward's painting of Seymour's Boatyard, the oldest and most picturesque boatyard, working boatyard on Long Island, in our estimation, and my creation. And there's the Newsday article with our Boys of Summer. And here we are for one of our interviews. And my Beachy Keen, which came from Cove Beach in Huntington, made the New York Times. And Bios TV, Push Pause, did a couple of video interviews of us, and Greg Blank wanted to do a simulation of Ward's taking me to these different locations. So we went back to the Victorian house. I should have worn bikini underpants. But you know, sometimes we don't think of these things. And there we are, back in 2015. 7 years makes a difference. And here we are at the Jeannie Tingleton Gallery of the Art League and the reception for our exhibit. And then the following week, we did a gallery talk. And you can see this is just a portion of the downstairs. There's also upstairs. And from that exhibit, we were invited to exhibit at the Long Island MacArthur Airport back when they actually had a gallery. Now, Ward said to me, Holly, what in the world do you want to have an exhibit at the airport? People aren't going to stop. They're coming and they're going. I said, Ward, you never know who might see it, and it's an opportunity to show our work. It wasn't a big exhibit. Maybe we had 8 or 10 pieces. So, this is what is so crazy. Neighbors of Arthur Dove's son, Bill, were passing through the airport. They saw our exhibit, left a note for us. Just uncanny. And then we were invited to exhibit in Patchogue because the theme of some big production that they were doing was collaboration, and Ward and I were collaborating. And the neat thing about our collaboration is, you know, sometimes artists' egos get in the way of relationships, and we just loved and admired what each other was doing. It was a synergy. It was extraordinary. So we exhibited in Patchogue, and then Linda Moran, the director of Islip Arts Council, was managing the Islip Art Museum, and she knew what I was doing with Ward, and so she said, why don't you be the curator for the museum's open call, The Art of Collaboration? So we threw out this invitation for artists to step out of their solitude and get together with 1 or 2 other artists, and the mediums could be different, but just to see what might happen if 2 or 3 artists put their heads together and create something. So that happened in 2019, and it was a fabulous exhibit. And there we are with my curatorial statement in the background. And we were invited to exhibit at the Selena Gallery of Long Island University in Brooklyn. there we are with the gallery director, and our driver was a good friend, and Ward and me in between. One day a package came, and I was getting ready to leave, but I said, oh no, Ward, open it up, I want to see what you ordered, because he was getting back into the swing of painting. And it was just so exciting to see his jubilation at opening up all of his paints. So in addition to his MS, he had cataract surgery. And the surgery, he had a lot of problems. And it took about 4.5 months for him to be able to see clearly and not mess around with all different kinds of glasses. So he really had a struggle. But he is back in the oops. He is back in the swing. Okay, so that's at his house. Now, most of the time when we would meet, I would drive up to him. But on this particular occasion, he stayed overnight at my house. And so he was able to photograph me in my studio. So this is something that I created. And this is from Bayard Cutting, Arboretum. And I introduced him to Bayard Cutting Arboretum. So we did a little bit of cross-island exchange in inspiration. And then this is his version of the manor. My barn and his barn. Now, here we are signing a contract with the printer, with a printing company that was going to publish our book. Because our book publisher, all during this time, we connected with a very well-known book designer who was very taken by our artwork and our story, who suggested that she should do a book proposal because publishers like to put their own thumbprint on their finished product. So she didn't think it would be a good idea for her to design our whole book, just to do a book proposal for our book packager to send out to different companies. Now, in the meantime, a friend is saying, Holly, before she does anything, why don't you look at photography books to see what kind of layout you're interested in? So my kids in Chicago had sent me the Obama intimate portrait with White House photographer Pete Souza for Christmas. And a beautiful, beautiful book. So I'm getting ready to let Bonnie Bryant know that she should check out the Obama book, the intimate portrait book. And my friend says, well, why don't you look and see who designed the book? It was a New York Times bestseller book way back. Our book designer designed the book. So when I contacted her, I said, well, gee, Bonnie, you're familiar with the layout. I love it. You know, do something like that for our book. You don't need to study it because you were the creator. So we are signing, this is February 13th or 14th, we are signing the contract with our book, with the printing company that's going to do our book. Now, in the meantime, Michael Shantz, who was the executive director of the Heckscher Museum, was contacted by this Valerie Ballant, who was doing the guide to historic artists' homes and studios, because he knew what I was doing with the Dove Torr Cottage, and she wanted Dove Torr Cottage pictures. So my photographs, thanks to him, are in her book. So the Heckscher Museum has both of our books. And this is the birth announcement, because I will tell you, the agony, you know, like women will know better than men as far as childbirth is concerned, unless you're in the labor and delivery room with your wife. But getting a book published is agony, and then going through everything and all of the checks and so forth. But when that book comes out and you hold it in your hands, it's all of the pain and the agony is gone. So, and of course, when does the book come out? Right in the throes of COVID. So, we did a lot of Zooms, we did a lot of crowdcasts, and the book review is history now. It's not there anymore, but that's where we did our book launch virtually. And there are Ward and me in our masks because we had to go in to sign books. And there you see us signing them. We were 6 feet apart. And that's our book. And amazing, we were one of 5 finalists in the art division in the 2021 Next Generation of Indie Books. And Dan Badeo had us in the coffee table books that year in Newsday. And then Artists Magazine had a feature about us. And then in January the following year, Newsday did a big spread. And then the Faces of Long Island featured us. And our book is with the Long Island Authors Group. It's all over. It's in Barnes & Noble. It's Simon & Schuster's our distributor. And we did a book talk here last September. And podcasts. So this is a photo montage that I did from several sunsets in Sanibel. So I'm researching Arthur Dove, and there's his painting. It was it's just utterly amazing. From this that I did in 2011 to discovering this in 2016, 2017. And all during this time, Ward keeps saying to me, do we really need Arthur Dove and Helen Torr? I mean, aren't we good unto ourselves? Until I show him this painting by Dove and how similar it is to Ward's painting. So then he said, okay, Holly, we'll include them. So we are connected to the Dove Block Project, to the gallery in Geneva, New York. And in July, I'm going to go there to share our book with, because Geneva is where Dove came from. And it's taken them a few years to create this marvelous gallery, but they have it now, and we are scheduled to talk in July. So Ward will do it via Zoom, and I'll be there in person. Ward is still painting. He goes to the Huntington Senior Center every Thursday. He also paints at home. But here's one of his paintings, and another one of his paintings, and another one, and another, and another. I particularly love this because it's such a deviation from what he usually does, but he is still experimenting. Okay, so this is just to give you a little bit of an idea. This is the photograph that I took for my Beachy Keen. And during this time, now this is what is so weird. I have been experimenting with technology since 1999. When I came back from Antarctica and we had stopped in the Falklands, I had taken this photograph of this street scene and I needed to make some changes. So I never really gave any thought to what I was doing other than the fact that I was experimenting. And over the course of time, somebody said, well, Holly, you really ought to give what you're doing a name. And, oh, I was thinking of all kinds of things. I was going beyond photography. And then it went into something very, very long and boring. There are a lot of art movements that are isms. And liminal means in transition. It's where there isn't any established vocabulary or acceptance. It's kind of like when the Impressionist painters first showed their work. The establishment went, ooh, this is vulgar. This isn't what painting is supposed to be. And it took society, it took them 20 years to embrace it. So I thought, okay, I will call my work photoliminalism. It only took me 18 or 20 years to come up with that. So here is something that I took in 2006 when I was doing an agriculture project on the North and the South Fork. I've always been very environmentally conscious and sensitive. Mother Nature has no voice. I want my work to speak volumes for her. And when I photographed this, I saw the fuel tanks as this dystopian army coming to invade and take over our soil. And I was struggling with it for a very long time until 2016 when I created this. And there were, I don't know, crows, grackles, whatever, flying around that were just like these minuscule things in the sky. And I thought, I am going to import Vincent van Gogh's crows over the wheat field, because that, to me, will capture the emotional devastation that I feel about what could happen to our environment, to our landscape. So I finally finished it. And this I created from Provence. See, I want you to see that I don't just talk, I create too. And from Giverny. And this was in the Great American Paint-In in 2021. You could kind of see a little bit of a reflection of me. I photographed that when I was in Belgium in 2019. And this is Les Andelys in France. And so I'm in a gallery, and I strike up a conversation conversation with this artist, and he says to me, "No, Holly, what you're doing is very interesting. Why don't you check out the Texpressionists?" So I contacted the fellow who was the originator, this Colin Goldberg, and because Texpressionism is a 21st century art movement that deals with artists who are using technology for their creative expression. And it's like, oh, if they like what I'm doing, I think I have found a group to belong to. So, I am a Texpressionist. And this Saturday is a reception at the Southampton Art Center. And I was invited to have 3 pieces in it. No sooner did I become a Texpressionist than I was invited to do a Zoom salon. And the neat thing about this is international. There are artists who are zooming in from Africa and Europe and Asia, from India. It's extraordinary. And I was thrilled to be able to share my creative journey. So this, and this are my 3 pieces that are in the exhibit. And what is so crazy about this, and I'll show you. Okay. When I was in Maui in 2006, 2007, and with a friend who had property there. And he took me into the Peony Peninsula where the water comes gushing, it's on the road to Hana, and where the water comes gushing in against the lava rock. And I had my camera set up on my tripod with my remote control. I'm clicking away and I'm changing the settings because sometimes I want to capture the droplets and sometimes I want the water to be kind of gossamer and smooth. And I feel absolutely embodied by Jackson Pollock, the king of the drips, who was pouring. He knew what he was doing and the different consistencies of the paint and how, as he spread it on the canvas, what it would do. And I was doing the very same thing. So I took over 100 images of this. And I come back, and I had a patron at that time. Unfortunately, he passed away. And every time I'd come back from a trip, I would set up a slideshow. And he looks at my water stuff, and he says, "Holly, they don't do anything for me. They look like they're tourist snapshots." Oh, he could have stabbed me, but it's okay, because I can take it. And I put those image files away on my computer for a couple of years until my son gave me some Nick Silver Effects software, and I decided that I was going to experiment and see what I might create. So between 2009 and 2012, I created these from my original shots. Now, this is an original shot, just to show you that this is what I created from it. And now it's all part of Texpressionism. It's just a pretty, incredible journey. And that's it. So, if you have any questions I did bring a couple of copies of the book. If anybody would like to purchase the book, they're available. And half of the proceeds will go to the Historical Society. And if you don't want to, no hard feelings. So, any questions, comments?
How is Mr. Ward, the paid Ward doing?
Ward is doing great.
How old is he, 93?
He, oh my God, 90, 93, 94.
Is all of his work watercolor, strictly watercolor, or did he try different mediums?
He is a watercolorist.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes, he's strictly a watercolorist. However, after his cataract surgery, when he was having so much trouble seeing and holding paintbrushes and everything, he did get acrylics. But he is 99.9% a watercolorist.
What number, do you remember what number you lived on, Manor Lane?
Pardon?
When you moved out here and you lived on Manor Lane, do you remember where you lived? What number?
Of course.
Yeah, like BA7.
North and
People-
south of the track.
I think 941. I mean, it was 2 houses north of Bardelier.
Okay, 941.
It's been
Pickens
expanded.
house.
Now, the funny thing is, so we lived on Manor Lane, and then we moved to Aberdeen, and lived there. We moved there in 1979, and in 2010, because I lived there for a bunch of years after my husband passed away, I just decided I'm traveling so much, I don't need the whole big house and so forth. So I moved to Sunscape North. So in all of the years I've lived in Bayshore, I've been moving laterally east. And if I move again, I'm going to wind up in the Brightwaters Lakes. Yes.
I was interested in Arthur Dove.
Wait, say that.
Arthur Dove and
Yes.
his connection to Bayshore, because I was told by a friend of Dr. Holt's, our home at the Historical Society, the Gibson Mac Holt House. Dr. Holt lived there, and she had some connection with Arthur Dove, and he gave her a painting of his work, and she told me that she thought it was at the Heckscher Museum, but we never knew the title of it, and that connection just was in my mind.
Some of Dove's works are called Untitled, number 1, number 2, so it may not have, but you probably could do some research to see if it does have a title. But it's just, it's so crazy. It's like our book publisher is from Westport, Connecticut. And he said the crazy thing is Arthur Dove lived for a while in Westport, Connecticut. So it's just amazing. It's almost like at this stage in my life, my pieces are like a jigsaw puzzle, and they're beginning to fit together. And when we're young, I guess we don't have a lot of pieces to fit together. And it's just kind of crazy how things come together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Work is extraordinary.
You're very welcome.
That was incredible.
But, you know, I just have to tell you that there never, in what I did, there was never any plan for what I wanted to achieve or accomplish. It was just, I wanted to stay positive on life and living because every day is so precious, and just see what happens.
I have another question.
Yes.
Do you ever consider archiving your work with Hofstra?
I'm glad you're mentioning that. My Antarctica and Galapagos are with the Malloy College.
Oh, right, okay.
And I am a vendor with Langone, and I've got something hanging in the Stony Brook Hospital. But I do have a gallery rep, and she's going to archive.
You
and
should be.
take
Yeah,
it.
a friend of mine, a very, very close artist friend of mine from East Northport, Hans Gabali, you probably, he passed away several years ago, but he's archived with Hofstra. And I think, you know, you and Wood absolutely should be archived someplace.
Thank you for telling me that. I will mention that to
Yeah.
my rep.
No, It's very important to do that.
Yes, it is.
Because the work disappears. He was a well-known muralist on Long Island and also an oil painter. And I have the largest collection of his works on Long Island, all different sizes. And if he wasn't archived, many of the outside and inside murals are disappearing, weather and whatever, changes of ownership inside. So I think it's very important that your work, because it's so beautifully done, it's archived someplace.
Thank you. Yes,
Yes.
I will do it, but not this
Yes.
weekend.
It's important. Should be remembered. Yeah. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you finished?